Okay, so a different kind of video today. I wanted to do something that was a little more thorough with my research and with the books I read and with what I kind of share with my audience. And so we've talked about this before. Just do a quick stand up here, where we've talked about like my library and how, you know, I've got all these like nonfiction books. And what I keep on the top is, in alphabetical order for both, what I keep on the top is the books that I've read. And there's a bit of a discrepancy here because I have read all my books on writing as well. And I have read books related to my workplace. And then these are the current books that I've read that I have not processed into my commonplace system, which is down at the bottom there. So we've talked about that before. Alrighty. But what I want to do is kind of share quick reviews and some of the highlights of the books that I read, because I think they'll provide value with you. One of the parts about having this kind of channel is being able to talk about things. And I read from a pretty diverse kind of set of, you know, books. I have a lot of leadership stuff. I have a lot of theology books. I have a lot of Christian kind of living, other kind of stuff. But I also read different books than you'd expect from like a Christian author. I read books that deal with different perspectives. I try to kind of follow these rabbit trails to kind of get the most kind of widest kind of assessment of any given topic. And so like if a book interests me, I pick it up. I don't kind of pre-screen it, except that, you know, it has to fit into one of my categories, which we talked about in my other video about like how I read my books, you know, that kind of stuff. So what I want to start with, and what this is kind of going to look like, is I want to start with like the top, you know, books there. Kind of by the cross, that's the A's, and recently I've been trying to get through my books in alphabetical order that I haven't already read, because I do have a large library. I have almost 450 books, nonfiction, including a ton of ebooks, that I want to get through and process into my commonplace system so I can, you know, write books of myself. And part of that is, you know, doing reviews on these books, extracting the material from it, and I just want to kind of share that process. So right now, if I got them all done on the same day, which would be insane, I have 147 books that I'd like to do a review for, and we're going to start with the most alphabetically leftwards one. That's Captain D. Michael Abrashoff's "It's Your Ship." This is one of the first leadership books that I did, that I picked up when I became a manager. Some of you might know, who are following me, that I wasn't always working in the church and I wasn't always writing. At one point, I was in property restoration shortly after Bible college, and my first failed job as a pastor, I got back into property restoration, and I was a flood technician where we dry houses after major weather events or like bad plumbing, you know, that kind of stuff. And I became kind of middle management. I became the operations manager for a large restoration firm, and I didn't know the first damn thing about management. And I knew I didn't when I was going into it. I knew it's like, I'm a good worker. I know how to run job sites, but what I don't know how to do is run people. I need to start reading. And I started building my library, which wasn't nearly this big at the time. And so I built a shelf similar to what's on my desk here, that kind of like bookshelf at the back end. Yeah. For my standing desk that I had, and I filled it with books from Value Village on leadership, just anything and everything that was kind of related to management and leadership and organization and productivity, because I knew I had a deficit in knowledge and needed to increase that knowledge. And this book was one of the first. I picked it up because you know, I have this thing for military books, especially when it's written from, you know, successful military people, because they have a different threshold for like what success means. If you've ever talked to military guys, especially officers and whatnot, they have to know what works, what doesn't, because it literally means life or death to them. You know, in the business world, it can be described as life or death, or really it's just profits. You know, and in you know, ministry settings or philosophical settings, you know, it can be, you know, dire existential crisis, which is really just us thinking too much. Military guys have to solve life and death problems all the time, and so their strategies for solving those problems, when applied to non-life and death problems, are really effective, if not blunt and kind of like harsh. You know, the adage, and I'm not sure where this comes from, I don't think it comes from this book, that, you know, 100% is impossible, but, you know, 75% violently executed gets the job done. Like that's possible, and that's the kind of stuff you get from military guys. So that's why I picked up this book. I just want to share some of the highlights. This is actually a great example, and I'll try and find one where I actually broke my you can tell I didn't know how to read books like I told you about, where you're highlighting you're dog-earing the wrong side of the page so that you can miss stuff. So I've gone through a few times, to make sure that I'm getting these things. But there's just some of the quotes I want to share. Like the first one, what all leaders have in common is the challenge of getting the most out of our crew, which depends on 3 variables: the leader's needs, the organization's atmosphere, and the crew's potential competence. I can't tell you how valuable that sentence was when I was, first a manager, because and this is like a truism about managers, is if you promote the best workers, you lose the best workers, because now they're managing and they're not working. And so I was a really great flood tech, and I had all the tools for doing, my job. And those tools left the job when I took the position. I was like, and I couldn't figure it out for like the first month or two. I was like, why aren't we getting these jobs done as fast as I used to get them done? Oh, it's because I'm not getting them done anymore. And it's something every manager hits. And this guy, saw it. He understood that, you have to understand the competency of your crew and what they're missing and what they need and the training that they need, because if it was you before you got promoted, then you need to go get those competencies into your crew, because you have to replace you. You're now in charge. You're no longer part of the work being done. You're part of the work being managed. Another great quote is, all too often, that's what happens when an accident occurs. Everyone tries to put their best spin on it. And he was talking about an incident that happened on his ship. And yeah, this was a really great eye-opener, because when accidents do happen, everyone goes in kind of defensive mode and starts acting like individual humans, and it gets ugly fast if no one's willing to be objective and actually try and find the truth, and not in a blaming way. Try and find out what happened so that they can go and deal with the root issues, deal with the root problems. So that's informed a lot of the stuff that I've done as well. Another great quote: change frightens workers, and their fears thrive in silence. The antidote is obvious. Keep talking. Tell everyone personally what's in store for him or her: new goals, new work descriptions, new organizational structure, and yes, job losses if that's the case. I can't tell you how important it is to be realistic with your employees if you are a manager. We would hit lulls in our industry, like flood restoration, because it was mostly weather related. We would get the most work when there were major weather events, and kind of thrived off fixing houses that were damaged during major storms, or like big melts in the mountains that would cause rivers to rise and stuff like that. We would thrive, because our job was to fix things that were broken. Seems kind of, sideways and stuff like that. But when we were dead, you could see it coming from miles away, because, the weather was good for 6 months, and you could tell we're going to run out of work in about 6 months. Because it takes a long time to be able to put a house back together. And aside from like one-offs where like a house would burn down, we'd have to rebuild it, like a car would crash into a house, but that happens so infrequently in our market that we would have to deal with that kind of stuff. And so when you can see that stuff coming wild up, be real honest with your guys. And I was really honest with my guys. I was like, look, we're going to start running out of work. I want to keep you guys, but I'm also like not going to keep you for myself, as if I know you don't need to go pay your bills and don't need to go find another job. If you guys find another job and you leave, that's tragic, but that's understandable. I'm not going to mince words. Our hours are going to reduce, and you need to do what you need to do. And that kind of transparency really helped me with my employees, which was really good. And I don't really have that atmosphere like right now, because I'm kind of the only guy in my department, but it really did help me out. Another quote, get the page, Mikey, was this kind of insight, because mid-level managers should be the ones to survey gray areas and provide direction. There's a ton of gray areas where it's kind of fuzzy for people at the bottom who know that someone else should be making this decision, and people at the top who know that this shouldn't be something that they have to deal with, and you get these kind of fuzzy aspects of work culture and fuzzy problems that are just like, what are we supposed to do there? That's what middle management's for. It should be completely delegated to the middle management, so that the bottom gets the authority that it's looking for, and the top gets the the distance from the problem that's only going to distract them from the big work of making sure companies are pointed in the right direction, are organized the way they should be, all that kind of stuff. Mid-level managers are problem solvers, and it should be completely handed off to them. And that kind of wisdom, that was so helpful when I became a manager. It was so helpful. Another great quote: "There's an art to managing your boss." Yes, managing your boss. And this is a great chapter because it does. Communication and authority and relationships always work both ways. There are so very few one-way relationships where the only way you can operate is within that kind of delegated authority structure. Your performance affects how your boss treats you. Your attitude towards your boss, even in the absence of good performance, affects how your boss treats you. And once you open your eyes to that, it's amazing how much of it goes around where you can really kind of suss out these things and see how the dynamic of work actually works. And so yeah, you manage your boss. You manage your boss by either being a good employee, a bad employee, a communicative employee, or various other different kind of variables that are entirely in your control, that aren't in the control of your boss, so that they affect the way that you and your boss relate to each other. And then, yeah, a universal trigger is saving money. It's if you save your boss money, you're going to be in the good books. It's not rocket science, guys. It's literally how the U.S. Navy works. Another great quote: "When people don't agree with you, they slow their actions until they're past the drop-dead date." The drop-dead date is a great term where it's this is the last possible day where something can happen. If someone disagrees with you, it's a natural tendency to just not comply, and you'll see a slow action until you get to a date which is going to force the conflict where maybe they have more social clout and they can be able to do that. When you see that in the Navy, it's if you're planning a mission and someone doesn't agree with you and they're going to slow it down, people can die because they're not following orders. They could die when they're following orders anyway. So that kind of mutiny, or that kind of belligerence, is toxic in an environment. And so you need to be able to find it, you need to be able to track it and see where they're being slow to answer, and then go confront them about it so that you can be on the same page and get the same thing done so the mission can move forward. Again, foundational, great things to know. Getting to the last couple quotes here. "Show me a manager who ignores the power of praise, and I will show you a lousy manager. Praise is infinitely more productive than punishment. Could anything else be clearer?" Yeah, it's 100% true. Praising people as opposed to punishing them works. The job I had in between working in property restoration and coming to work at the church where I do now, I sold suits for Moors, and it was fun. And the manager there was a great guy. I loved him outside work, hated working for him because he did not know how to praise his employees. He only knew how to criticize him, and he was right 100% of the time. He was factually correct about his job and knew exactly what he was talking about when it came to sales. He did not know how to motivate and praise his employees. He only knew how to criticize them. So we kind of had to support each other as employees, and then the boss would come in and just always be a wet blanket, and it was horrible. And the second, and I hate to say this, the second he got removed for a season, sales went up. Why? Because there was motivation, and we had to be able to kind of do that stuff. We had to be able to kind of work, and all of a sudden there was motivation without that wet blanket. And so never underestimate, especially in a management situation, the power of praise compared to the power of punishment. They're completely different concepts. There is a place for punishment, and it happens. When it happens, it seems to happen too little. But there should be, mountains of praise for, molehills of punishment when it comes to trying to influence your staff. Finally, one last quote, and this isn't all the quotes. This is just, kind of a selection of the ones that I like. It's the last one in the book. Getting an entire group to excel is worth any number of offended peers. Maybe it is best to simply accept the fact that excellence upsets people. It always has and always will. Live with it. Interdepartmentally, especially in big organizations, this can really be a thing where you just have to understand that there are certain departments that are always going to be mad at you because your department's excellence would put them at odds to each other, and there's always kind of like office politics and office relationship dynamics and all that kind of stuff. And you know, if you can get your group to excel, where you guys are happy at the end of the day, where you're getting things done, and where you're, you know, doing all that kind of stuff, it's important. And I think he is 100% right that, you know, it is worth any number of offended peers, because, you know, if they're offended that you're doing good, that offense is never going to provide them with the kinds of benefits that having a successful group or a successful department is going to have. And so, you know, be offensive if you need to. It seems harsh, seems counterintuitive that you all want to be happy-go-lucky, you know, kumbaya and stuff like that. I can tell you from experience that when you nail this, when you get it, it's amazing. So that is It's Your Ship by Michael, Captain D. Michael Abrashoff. Abrashoff. I'm going to say the name right, dang it. And it was one of the first books on leadership I read, and it was the first book in my library, at least until I find someone with a name that, you know, beats Abrashoff, you know, Abrashoff. I don't know how to say his name. I hope I don't ever meet this guy or that he reads it. But, you know, definitely pick this up if you're going to see it. It's a great book if you're in leadership. And yeah, it's a great read for middle managers from a very unlikely space, the U.S. Navy. So definitely check that out.